Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang Dhammang Sanghang Namasami. So I'd like to offer my greetings and welcome everyone this evening. So one of the things that um, for a lot of people who come new to Buddhism and weren't born and raised Buddhist and at some point discovered Dhamma and the teachings of the Buddha is that a lot of times what brought us to this teaching, to this method of practice, was a lot of the wisdom aspects of it. So, this the Four Noble Truths, the three characteristics, there's lists and lists of these different wisdom teachings, these aspects of wisdom. And so what can happen sometimes from, what I've seen is that um, sometimes we can focus too much on these certain, the intellectual aspects of it, on the more analytical parts, the wisdom, the Vipassana teachings of it. And we can sometimes forget and leave out other aspects of the teaching, other, important things, such as faith, such as some of the more developing these positive emotions, these positive mind states, and these meditation objects that, may feel more emotional. And particularly in these teachings known as the four Brahmaviharas or the four divine abidings. And so the first one is metta or loving kindness. The second one is karuna or compassion. The third one is mudita, which interesting, we actually don't have a word for this in English. A lot of times we translate it as appreciative joy or something like this, but it's really this finding happiness from other people's happiness. When other people have success, when good things happen to other people, us finding happiness in that. And the fourth one is upekkha or equanimity. And so there's this very famous Sri Lankan monk in America named Bhante Gunaratana. I think he must be close to 100 years old by now. And he has a monastery in West Virginia. And he's, a very, very good teacher. Supposed to be a very good meditator too. And I remember was reading in one of his books or listening to a Dhamma talk by him. And he was talking about this one time he was in Germany and he was teaching a retreat there. And this one laywoman came to him and was asking him about what he taught. What kind of teachings does he do? And she asked, like, "Oh, do you teach Vipassana?" And he's like, "Oh, yes, yes, I teach Vipassana, which is Vipassana's insight." And then she's like, "Oh, do you teach jhanas?" And he's like, "Oh, yeah, yeah, I teach jhanas. Yeah, I teach that. So that's the meditation absorptions." And then she goes, "Oh, do you teach metta, which is loving kindness?" And he's like, "Oh, yeah, I teach metta." And she's like, "Oh, I don't like metta. I don't want any of that." And so um and she obviously didn't see the value of that. She saw the value of the developing concentration and wisdom, but didn't see the value of the loving kindness. And there was this, when I was a junior monk, there was this one senior Australian monk, and he came to visit us. And he was telling this story about in Australia, there was this couple, these two Australian lay people, a husband and wife, and they used to come to the monastery. And I think they used to teach a certain method of Vipassana meditation. And then unfortunately, they ended up splitting up. The husband met a new woman and they ran off to another country together and started, I think, a restaurant or something. And the wife, or the now ex-wife, was just devastated by this. And she went to go see this Ajahn. And, she was telling him about this. And she's like, but I don't know what's happening. I've been practicing for 20 years and it's not helping me. I'm just so still so just devastated by this. She's was talking about the method she was using. I just keep noting these emotions and, saying like uh sadness, anger, d despair, and all this, and it's not getting rid of them. And then this Ajahn, said to her, was like, well, have you ever tried loving kindness? Have you ever tried metta? And because her practice had been so focused on these other things that, she didn't realize that the benefit of doing some of these practices that have the emotion to it. So metta or loving kindness, this is this well-wishing and this kind of genuine feeling of wanting the best for other people, wanting them to be happy, wanting them to meet with success in their lives. And then the second one, karuna or compassion. And again, this is that same emotion, but directed to people who are suffering, people who are going through rough times in life. Something bad is happening to them. And so the third one is mudita. So again, this like we don't have this in English, but it's that same emotion, but that having happiness and wanting other people to succeed and getting happiness from the successes and the happiness of other people. And the fourth one is equanimity. So this is just this ability to stay even, to stay level, no matter what's going on, not to be going up and down with all of these things. Because with developing the Brahmaviharas, if done correctly, there's uh, a lot of benefit to it. One is using them something like metta as a method of meditation. It's a great way to develop our concentration, our samadhi, but it also really develops this like these strong emotions. It works against our anger, and it also just really this emotional stability to us. But like with many practices in Buddhism and many of the practices the Buddha gave, some of these you have to really pick up the right way because, the Buddha was saying before that with these, with these practices, they're like tools and it's very easy to pick them up in the wrong way. And so he compared it to like picking up a knife. If you pick up a knife the right way, like by the handle, it's a great tool. You can do all kinds of like cutting with it. And but if you pick it up the wrong way, if you pick it up by the blade, you're going to hurt yourself. You're going to cut your hand. So too with these practices. So sometimes, with loving kindness, if you do it the wrong way, you can get into, it can lead to more like greed, lust, that more attachments, or say with something like karuna or compassion, if picked up the wrong way, and you're just really trying to send this loving kindness to people who are suffering. You may be seeing their suffering wrong and getting too much into it, and it may without any balance, it might lead to more like grief and despair within yourself. So, like you can see a lot of times in life, like people who do like first responders and stuff, who their whole life is helping people and saving people. It can sometimes really build up for them, and they can have difficulties because of this. And then with equanimity, if you pick it up wrong, it can lead to more like apathy, like, just this attitude of, you're trying to stay balanced, but, it can turn to that attitude of, well, life sucks anyway, so who cares, right? And so we don't want to get into that. We want to be able to be nice and even, nice and solid. So one of the stories for equanimity, because you can look at people who don't have equanimity in life. Like, you can look at yourself or you can look at people around you and you can see, we all know certain people who sometimes, they're very swayed by what's happening around them. When things are good or something good happens, they're just, over the moon. They're excited. They're all over the place. They're really like intoxicated with whatever is happening. But then on the flip side, then something bad happens. Even something, we may perceive as something minor or something not that important. and they're just, completely devastated by it. They completely fly off the handle, maybe despair or anger. And so it's, kind of like that yo-yo, up and down, up and down. And and then you see other people in life, and they're kind of chill, they're kind of cool with it. Like stuff happens, they're like, yeah, okay. Or something bad happens. Yeah, it's just the way it is. And so, again, some people will have a little more of this equanimity naturally, from maybe how they've practiced in the past, or how they were raised and stuff. And some people don't. But again, like everything, these are skills and qualities we can develop. So one of the stories that is you know, often told to illustrate this is the story of this king. And this king would get whenever things were going, and he didn't have any equanimity, and whenever things were going great in the country, he'd be super happy and partying and just, really, really just really into it. But then when things were going bad for the country, he'd drop into this like deep depression, despair, and he'd lock himself in his chambers and stuff, and he wouldn't come out. And so finally, all his ministers got together and they're like, okay, we can't have this. We need to do something. Like, we can't have, the king so kind of back and forth, so up and down. And so what they did was they had a ring made for him, and inscribed in the ring was, "This too shall pass." And so this was a reminder to him that, when things were going well, he'd just look at the ring and reflect, okay, this too shall pass, and not to get too attached to it and too like intoxicated with it. But then when things went bad, also, okay, this too shall pass. And so not to worry too much, not to get so down with that. Because for a lot of us, uh, this is what happens. Life is, uncertain. Things are always changing. The Buddha guaranteed us that, one of the characteristics of the conditioned world is that everything is subject to change. And so no matter how hard we try to kind of manipulate and control and create our external environment the way we want it, it's always going to change. We can't control everything. Unexpected things happen. Even, you think for like a monk living alone in the forest, you'd think, oh, well, that's going to be pretty much like Groundhog's Day, the same day, the movie Groundhog's Day, like the same day again and again. But it's really not. All kinds of things happen when you're living in the forest. Actually, living in the forest itself becomes your teacher. And so it's like this in life. But for most of us, we have this not on the thinking level or the cognized level, just deep down on the felt level. When things are going well, we have this feeling, oh, it's always going to be like this. So when it inevitably changes, we suffer because we were attached to that. And then when things are going badly, a lot of times we have that feeling, oh, it's always going to be like this. Everything's ruined. It's never going to get better. But it changes. And so we can just one of our ways to try to develop more equanimity and more like stability in us in our life is just to keep reminding ourselves of this, reminding ourselves of this impermanence, and that things are going to change. Um, but it's really good to remember too that like, so in Thai you always hear this expression, my indi, my in rai. So a lot of the teachers say it. It means not to delight and not to be adverse. So to be able to stay solid. But again, this is one of those places where it's important not to pick up the teaching in the wrong way, because sometimes you may hear that and, oh, don't delight, don't be adverse. So it's like, oh, don't be happy or sad, and you think that equanimity is just this kind of apathetic, almost like, catatonic, like zombie, like that means I'll have no emotion. I'll just be kind of blah, like kind of like a baseline, nothing. But it's okay. It's okay to be happy. But what it's saying is not getting carried away in it, not getting intoxicated with it. But yeah, it's always okay to, have those, be happy and have good things going on in your life. And we are trying to reduce our suffering and bring this kind of deeper levels of happiness into our life. So uh, one of the ways to develop this stability in life, this equanimity. Because it's okay to say, yeah, you should have it, but it's easy to say, but you've got to, do something to develop it. So one of the things is just, we can do from developing our samadhi, our concentration, our absorption. So this, will give us this stability of mind. The more, when we're meditating and getting our mind peaceful, and having that peacefulness of mind can help keep it stable. But we don't want to depend just on that, just on our concentration, just on that type of meditation. And so Lumpur Biek, he would talk about this. He'd say that if you just depend on the samadhi, the concentration to deal with the emotions coming up, or in this case, it would be to stay equanimous. He said that's good as long as the meditation is there. But if something happens and you lose that meditation or you lose that samadhi for a bit, your whole it all falls apart. So basically, everything you've had to deal with this falls apart. And then he said it's almost like you've never practiced then. So what he said he encourages to do is to develop um, wisdom along with it. So we're developing our wisdom as well, and in developing some of these reflective abilities. So like I was saying earlier, this reflecting on impermanence. Okay, this is going to pass. And or one of the things we can also do is there's some of these little sayings, like one of the ones Lumpur Sumedho is known for is, he just says, it's like this. Because a lot of times in our mind, we start thinking like, oh, it shouldn't be like this, or it should be like that. And yeah, a lot of times we're right. Yeah, he shouldn't be saying this, or he shouldn't be doing that. And really, people should be doing this, but they're not. It's like this. And so it's sometimes just, when I always find when that word should starts coming up into my thinking, that it's suffering is going to follow, like should just signals there's going to be suffering. So just remind yourself, yeah, okay, it's like this. Or his other one is, this is the way it is. And so, bringing up these reflections can really help us with that. And one of the ways the Buddha taught us to do it in the suttas is to reflect on karma. And so just reflecting that, say for example, something, bad happened to us, you can think, okay, well, maybe this is my karma. Maybe I've done something bad in the past, instead of, oh, why did this happen to me? Oh, it's so terrible. Think, okay, well, this is karma, maybe I did something for this. Or if something happens to or someone else does something to us, you just reflect on, okay, well, this is his karma. If he's done something, unwholesome, he's going to be making some karma for that. I don't have to get back at him for anything. I don't have to do this. Whatever's going to happen, he's going to have some karma for that. But it's really important for us not to pick up this teaching in the wrong way, because, again, this can lead to that almost not doing anything about problems. We think, okay, well, it's just my karma, so I'll just leave it. So, for example, you come down with some kind of illness and you think, okay, well, it's just my karma. And so you don't treat it. It's like, okay, yeah, you can say, okay, it's my karma, so you don't have that extra mental suffering over it, but you still go to the doctor to treat it. So there's this one time when I was living with Lumpur Biek. This was many years ago, and Lumpur Liam came to visit. And so Lumpur Liam, he's my upajjhaya, or my preceptor. So he's the monk that ordained me, and he's the abbot of Wat Pah Pong, Ajahn Chah's monastery. So he's the successor to Ajahn Chah. And kind of two qualities that really shine through when you meet Lumpur Liam and get to know him is one, he's just such a wisdom character. Like his teachings are very wisdom teachings, and really unique ways he'll look at things. But the other about him, and you can just see this in him, and then when you get to know him, you see it even more clearly, is he is equanimity. Like his character, he's just so like cool and like relaxed and just laid back, and like things just don't bother him. He just has so much equanimity. And so he came to visit us at Lumpur Biek's monastery, and I was up with some other monks and some lay people chatting with him one evening. And this was right after that Malaysian airline flight disappeared. And one of the laymen who actually is a airplane mechanic, he was saying to Lumpur Liam, he was like talking about this because it would come up the issue of this. People were asking about this flight which disappeared. And this layman had said, oh, well, it just must be all of their karma. Like they must have all done something bad together in the past, and this is just their karma that the flight disappeared. And Looper Liam said to him, he's like, you mustn't think like that. He said, if you start thinking like that, you won't look for the cause of the problem. So again, he wasn't saying we shouldn't reflect on karma and stuff, but he was trying to say like, don't just, you don't just say, okay, it was karma and then leave it. You could say, okay, yeah, maybe it was their karma together, but let's figure out what happened to this plane. What caused this accident? What was the root cause of that? So with us too in our life, in our practice, if we're reflecting on karma, it doesn't mean we can't do something about it. So if say you're at work and you have another coworker or colleague who's treating you really badly, you know, to cut out some of the mental suffering about that. You can say, okay, well, he's just making his own karma. That's whatever he's doing, it's his karma. But you can still go through the proper channels to fix the problem. So it doesn't mean it's just this like just letting whatever happens to you in life. Um, and so again, using some of these reflections and some of these ways to, change the way you look at things, to just have a little more equanimity about it. I remember again once when I was a junior monk, there was someone was going online and really criticizing our sangha and saying some pretty bad things about some of the monks and about our sangha. And I remember one of the senior monks, he went to go see Lumpur Liam and tell Lumpur Liam about what was going on. And he told him, he's like, yeah, online on the internet, these people are saying these things about us, and it was going on. And Lumpur Liam's just so relaxed and laid back, and he just goes, yeah, I don't have the internet, so it doesn't bother me. And so, sometimes just changing the way you look at it, and sometimes just learning to be even. And but then when, this is something which takes time for us to develop. The reason equanimity is the fourth of the Brahmaviharas, the last one, is because this is the hardest one for most of us to develop. So it is one which, it takes more time to develop, but it's one, it's again, as we're practicing it, it's not like we're going to go from if we start off as someone who's completely up and down, and then all of a sudden, we're going to start practicing being someone who's just like Lumpur Liam, like just completely like in Thai they say yen, which is like cool, like temperature wise, like cool. And so we can't just go from 1 to 100 like that. What you'll find is you'll get more and more equanimity, and then you'll get more times when you're not bothered by something, and but then you'll still get your ups and downs, and you just when after you've had that, it's just like, okay, it happened. Let's just go on, keep practicing some more. Don't come down hard on yourself about it. So I would like to offer that to everyone as a bit of a reflection for this evening.